Right, so today I'm going to be changing this sump on my smart car, which you guys haven't seen yet. It's a common thing to have to do because Smart from the factory produce these cars with a sump without a drain plug. The whole reason behind that was I believe you were meant to draw the oil out through the dipstick tube and refill it that way, but in this case I want one with a drain plug, and I want to be able to see the health of the bottom end as well. Well, I won't see the bottom end because of the windage tray, but just to see what's hiding in the sump waiting for me. So I'm going to change the sump, oil change obviously at the same time, change the filter. It's snowed outside, so it is freezing today, but I'm in a nice big garage, so that really helped. Right, so the parts I've got for this job are a sump gasket. This sump is a rubber reinforced sump gasket from Smart Mods, UK based company I believe. This seems like a good idea to me, but we'll see how well it works out. They've not had any complaints about it, so I'm going to give it a go, because I'd rather use an actual gasket rather than RTV, because the chance of this engine dying before its time is highly likely anyway, just because the nature of these cars. I've got a Bosch oil filter and a generic cheap eBay sump, which we'll see how good this is, but we'll just roll with it for now. So if you're watching this anyway, you already know what your engine looks like and where to go for certain things. So we've got a dipstick tube there. I'm going to use this pipe to suck the oil out through the dipstick tube using a large syringe. It's a simple enough thing to do. I'm not going to try and get all of the oil out, just most of it, so I don't cover myself when I undo the sump itself. Right, so as we come under the vehicle, we have the oil filter housing there and the sump just there, the nice big rusty thing. So it's a good idea to change that anyway. Now there is a oil cooler mod you can do with these. You can also convert these to a spin-on type oil filter. For now I'm just replacing the standard oil filter, but I am looking at doing a oil cooler conversion on this car because of the mileage that it does. The 452 Roadsters have it, the Brabus 450 has it, and the Brabus Roadsters have it, and funnily enough they last a lot more miles than these engines do. So I think that the oil gets too hot, loses its lubricating properties, and just causes excessive engine wear. This car will be going to 1040 fully synthetic oil, but for now I'm going to be putting 530 back in it because I didn't pick some up in time, and I've got plenty of 530, which is what you should have anyway, I believe. But yeah, it's normal to see oil here. The oil isn't actually from here, it's not from the gearbox, it's from further up on one of the intercooler pipes, because the way the crank breather system is done on these engines, it pumps oil into the intake of the turbo and then fills your intercooler up, which is a great idea. I love these cars, but Mercedes did so many avoidable things on. So the standard bolts for the sump are a E8 female Torx bit. If you've had your sump changed at some point, or the sump has a drain plug in it, the chances are you could end up with mix and matched bolts, but the standard ones are an E8 female Torx. So I've got my syringe set up here with a pipe, and the pipe I'm going to just simply pull out the dipstick, lay that to one side, put it in the airbox, seems like the safest place for now. Take the end of this pipe and just pop that down the dipstick tube. Let's give you some light. And just pop that down the dipstick tube like so until we get to the bottom. There we go. That's what we want. well, that took an absolute eternity to do, as I expected. It's not a fast way of doing it, but it's the cheapest without drilling a hole in the sump. I don't recommend drilling a hole in the sump. If you had an electric siphon pump, that would be a lot quicker. But we eventually got done with the syringe. Now we're going to move down to the bottom side to do the oil filter and then start loosening off the bolts for the sump. Right, so I've got a makeshift drain pan here, and this is a 27mm socket. It fits perfectly on the oil filter housing there. I'm going to crack that off, and hopefully my makeshift oil catch pan will actually catch the oil. Or it won't, and it will go everywhere. Oh. This might take a while. There we go. It's a little bit tight. That's not uncommon for these plastic oil filter housings. And then the oil should start running any minute, or it won't. We will see. There we go. I can undo that by hand. Almost looks like I've done this before. The irony is, at work, whenever I'm draining the oil out of the motorcycle, I just cover the floor in oil every time. So I'm waiting to do that this time. So, let the residual drain off. Right, so I've got the new oil filter here, and it has got seal, which is good. I forgot to check the box, because we always check the boxes when they're already open. This one was sent to me and it had already been opened. Now, quite often things are just ordered wrong, so mechanics end up opening them, then they send them back to the motor factors, and the motor factor then has to resell them. So they're not always sealed, but I can make an exception for that a lot of the time because I work in the trade, so I know what it's like. So I've just used a screwdriver to get under that ridge there and just pop this out. Now I'm going to pop the new one in. Check that it's the same, which it is, but there's a bit more wadding stuff on this one. And it just pops in like that, nice and snug. Now we're going to replace that seal. Always replace this seal. They don't always need doing, but if you've got it, replace it, because it's the round seals aren't too bad, but some companies, I think BMW, use a square seal that's very easy to nick and just take the edge out of it, and then it leaks. Whereas these aren't too bad, but we'll quickly get that changed. All I'm going to do is just pop it off with a screwdriver and swap it on the new one. Right, so I've got that new seal on, lubricated with oil as well. It's very important to make sure you get it in the right ridge, because it does almost look like from this side that it will go there, but it doesn't. It goes on the very base, which is where you'd expect it to go, but just in case that confuses you, just rotate it round and you'll see the threads start going to that area. So we'll just get that refitted now, and then we're ready to move on to the sump. Now this only tightens to 25 Newton meters, I think it says. So you don't need to go crazy on it. Because if you do go crazy, it will leak, because you'll crack it. And that's why the spin-on conversion is better, because these often get cracked. And then obviously a cracked oil filter, you lose your oil pressure. Right. So now I'm under here. I have removed all of the bolts from around the sump. Didn't see the point in showing me undoing 14 E8 bolts. Everybody knows how to undo a bolt, so there's no point wasting time there. So I'm at the point now where I've just got to knock the sump off. So I've just put some cardboard down in case of spillage. But I'm going to take this last nut out. Right, so sorry about the shaky camera this time, but the sump's finally off. That's a process. So this adhesive sealant that they use really bonds the pan up to that flange, so that's going to be fun cleaning that off. And then sometimes you do have to pry these. Now I never recommend prying against the mating surface, but a guide on FQ101 advises prying onto this corner. I'm going to come back because I can't hold the camera like that. So on FQ101 they recommend prying on this corner, which is the timing case. So if you do damage it, you only damage this casing rather than the actual engine block itself, which is not bad advice. But personally, try and avoid prying if you can, but I think it's inevitable. So one thing you will want to do whilst doing this is cleaning off all this old gasket. Quite often way too much is used, and the biggest problem is you can end up with it coming away and being sucked in through the pickup tube. The chances are if I took this pickup tube off, the strainer inside there will be full of this rubberized sealant. Now I'm just using a razor blade. It's the simplest way to do it. That's a razor blade. Just go over it, try and get it as smooth as possible. It takes a while, but it's better to be thorough than risk having an oil leak on top of all this extra work just to change the sump anyway. Now you got to be careful not to nick the belt there as well, because that's an easy thing to do. But I'm just going to go around, do this, get this clean, and then we'll be popping the new sump on there. Alright, so I've cleaned off the best I can. It doesn't look like great, but that's as good as I can get it given the space I've got to work in. I might give that bit a little bit more attention, just there. But yeah, almost ready to pop that sump on. So all I'm going to do now is lay this gasket on here and put one bolt through up here because this is the highest point, and then I'm going to see if a couple of other bolts will hold in through the gasket just to make it a bit easier. But I'm going to start with putting this bolt in first, and then I'm going to work my way from the inside out in a tightening sequence, going from one side to another, trying to keep it even across it. Right, the new sump is on. Again, I didn't show the process of tightening all them up because there's no point. Basically, the specs I read online, 9 Newton meters if you're reusing bolts, 12 Newton meters if you're using new bolts. I've obviously reused the old bolts, and yeah, we'll just have to see how this goes. I'm praying that it doesn't leak, but we'll have to see. You never know when you're doing a sump. RTV does work better sometimes, but I'd just rather use an actual gasket, so we'll see. I'm gonna just get the car off the ramps and put some oil in it after cleaning off all this residual. Right, so we're at the point where we're filling it up now. I'm just filling it with 530, which is recommended for it, but I will be changing this car over to 1040 to slow down the wear and tear. this car does a lot of miles, so I don't really want to keep running it on oil that's not really adequate for the temperatures that the oil sees in this engine. Like I say, I'll be doing an oil cooler upgrade at some point, but this car's at 52,000 miles, so if it's going to die at the 70,000 mile mark, I want to at least try and slow it down as best I can. So I'm putting a bit in. I'm at the 3 litre mark now, and I'm just putting a bit in, letting it sit rather, and then checking it. Right, so let's see if this leaks oil or actually works. Let's hope it works. Well, I don't see any more leaks that I wouldn't expect. All that on the floor there is just from me spilling oil. I had to get some on the floor somehow. That's just how it goes with me. But that looks good. Right, so there you have it. That's how to change the sump and do an oil change on a W450 Smart for 2. This is a 700cc. The process is pretty much the same for the other models. Things I would say to look out for are, with the sump being bonded on, it is very difficult to get off. Prying on mating surfaces is really not a good thing to do, and you could definitely cause irreversible damage to parts of your engine by doing that. Once you've got two flat mating surfaces, if you create a gouge or any kind of grooves in that, then you could cause yourself a permanent headache. So if you want to do this, it's a job any home mechanic can do. Whether you should, I don't know. It's a bit more involved than changing a sump should really be, because of how bonded onto the engine that sump becomes. It's not because of how difficult it is, it's ground clearance. And so obviously if you're doing this on jacks, and if you've got the car on axle stands, you're not going to have that much clearance between the ground and the bottom of the car that you're working on. So it makes moving about quite difficult, prying on things a bit difficult, and then there's cleaning up the mating surfaces. It is a bit of a struggle, but it can be done. Getting the car on ramps, please make sure that you chock your wheels properly. This did roll off at one point whilst I was trying to put it on the ramps, and the handbrake was on. The handbrake works fine, but it didn't then for some reason. And the wheels spin. The electronic clutch does make it a bit difficult, but it's perfectly doable. You just have to have your wits about you. As for anything else with the job, it's a simple oil change. There are better tools than a syringe for drawing the oil out. There's siphon pumps, there's electric siphon pumps, there's a bottle, I can't remember what it's called, I think it's by Sealy, that draws the oil out for you as well. You just pump it up and it draws the oil through. That would have made this a lot quicker, but either way, most of the time was taken getting the sump off and cleaning up the gasket area. The rest of the job wasn't too bad, to be fair, so I can't really fault that. But that's the video done. That's how to do it. Any questions, leave a comment, message, like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Thanks for watching.